It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays. And I'm actually going to respond to a comment from Monday's video because I am not going to have time to get through everything this Feedback Friday. And I think that this particular point, it's one of those, if one person said it, then other people are thinking it. And so I want to give it special attention here. I admit this comment was triggering to me, and this does not mean the commenter did anything wrong. It just hit me sideways. And it took me a while to be certain as to why, but instead of just responding, I took some time to think about it. And I thought, all right, this is worth talking about, because I talked about it on the Discord as well, saying, have I missed anything here? You know, am I missing something or reading something in that isn't there or what? And nobody could find anything. So this is why I want to take it from the angle of, why be diplomatic even when other people aren't, right? And the TLDR is that it's not about them. It's about you and who you show up as and how you show up and how that reflects to other people, which does give you an element of protection in terms of your reputation and people believing the worst about you everywhere but the internet. For the internet, for some odd reason, nothing matters. If people want to be angry at you, they're going to hate on you, and you have to be diplomatic no matter how much people pummel you in comments. And that was part of the triggering part of the comment. Now I'm going to read the comment. And again, this is just to explain my reaction and to deal with the topic because I think it's worthy. This is not to beat up on the commenter. Okay, just to be clear, let me do the help support this channel. Patreon support is really, really helpful with things like this because it makes the pummeling feel a bit more worth it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. And I have to say, this has been a week where my diplomacy has been very taxed, which is another reason I think this comment hit me the wrong way. But something hitting you in the wrong way and actually hitting a trauma button are not the same thing. It was the beginning of the comment. It starts off ... trying not to rage here. I recognize you have good intentions. And that's what set me off. It hit something very primal in here. Like, I get that you mean well. You're still annoying and infuriating. That's how I heard it. Like, I was really hit by the idea that anything I said in that video would inspire rage. And this is just me being honest here, scared me. And I don't know it's the internet. Like I said, it's a trigger. It doesn't make logical sense. I'm just telling you where I came at it from. And again, this is me attempting diplomacy, saying, I don't think the person did anything wrong. I want to explain why I had to take a walk and take a shower and talk to a couple friends before I could respond to this, right? When someone is saying, I'm trying not to rage, that you're like, what? Whoa, hold up. And this is one of those things where, was rage just rhetorical hyperbole? Was it real? I don't know. And in the context of the video, but people being safe targets, my brain just started spiraling into like a hyperfixation thing. But At least they attempted to say I had good intentions. But it goes, but things like you're supposed to recognize you're excluded make me go, why? Most people with present day mores wouldn't expect members of any minority group to exclude themselves from gross blanket statements or play model minority or establish that they're one of the good ones in the face of vilification of their group. What, as a Jewish person, I push back on that because we're living in the age of, you're not like those other filthy Zionists, right? Like, oh, as long as you support Gaza, you're one of the good Jews, even though 8 in 10 Jewish people do self-identify as Zionists. So the fact that any minority group wouldn't be expected to exclude themselves from gross blanket statements, Zionism is genocide, it's just factually inaccurate. And I say this to say I'm not coming at the bulk of this video from a position of somebody who doesn't have to grit my teeth and be diplomatic sometimes, right? The no minority would be expected to exclude themselves from gross blanket statements is just not true. And anybody who's part of a minority group goes, are you serious? Because the comments about, the most classic one is the people crossing the border are bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. Any Mexican or Latin American immigrant was expected to sort themselves into the good people category. What's your problem, snowflake, if they didn't, right? There's a lot of that going around, and part of the reason to be diplomatic is the recognition that there's probably something in other people's experiences that you are missing. And if you are wrong factually on anything, people are less likely to listen to you. Diplomacy is all about being persuasive. The definition of diplomacy here is the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way. And the emphasis is on being effective. The sensitivity makes you effective, right? So going on. When you have the panel of the View saying men are useless from within their air-conditioned studio, that men likely did most of the work constructing, wiring, plumbing, insulating. And there's another boom, like, oh, one of my credits when I worked in television was set construction, right? Just men likely did most of the work of constructing. Oh man, like that. First of all, I don't know. I'll take the person's word for the fact that the panel of the View said men are useless. But again, that every single member of the View agreed that men are useless, or did one person say it? But again, when you're saying, oh, men build sets, right? Men likely did most of the work constructing, wiring, plumbing, when I have an X-Acto blade scar on this thumb from building a set. So forgot who the target was on that one. And it goes on. And expecting applause, you're looking at the normalization of hatred. I agree with that. And that's why it's important to be diplomatic, so you don't perpetuate that. The comment closes. I get really tired in the face of that, of being expected to play diplomat. The hypocrisy of it reeks. I don't know where in what I said communicated that people are expected to play diplomat. I said in the video, you have to decide whether this is somebody you still want around. If you do, okay, then you gotta play to be effective. But there's no expectation of diplomacy, at least not on my part. It's if you want to maintain the relationship and also stand up for yourself, here's how you do it, right? And in light of this comment, who was like, punch in the face, like that's what it felt like. Like, rage, you have good intentions, but, and then all these things, you wouldn't expect anyone to just think they're one of the good ones. Well, I do. Women don't build sets. That's paraphrasing, right? Like, men most likely did all of it. And now, if I respond to it at all, I'm expected to be diplomatic, right? Right. That's the irony of the comment. It feels unfair. Yeah. It feels like I'm responding with my hands tied behind my back and a gag over my mouth. I'm saying that's how it feels. But instead of just responding angrily, I took a walk and then I took a shower. And I talked to some friends, and they independently commented on the men likely did most of the work constructing comment. That's hit them wrong too. Here's my attitude about diplomacy, right? It is a life skill. And it's, like I said, it's not about the other person. It's about how you show up. And to me, if I'm diplomatic 95% of the time, then I feel like it's fair to expect people to cut me some slack when I finally crack from people telling me I inspire rage in them, right? Like when someone's saying they are actively trying not to rage, that means a video I made for YouTube where they assume I have good intentions, but I am still inspiring rage. You know, and here's the thing. The reason I'm pointing out this comment is the video was about, you know, safe target syndrome. When someone says something lacking tact, how to respond not in kind. And so getting a comment like this where why should I be expected to play diplomat? It's hypocritical. Well, I don't think the person's thinking about you that much in that moment. That's assuming an expectation I certainly didn't have, and proof is in the pudding of commenter, you didn't play diplomat here. You felt rage and said so and accused me of hypocrisy. Okay. Sure. And here's the thing about that is now you're complaining about something you yourself are doing, which, you know, these sorts of things are three-legged stools. And so if you kick out one leg, it falls over. And the paradox here of this particular thing is if you are objecting to people speaking thoughtlessly, if you are objecting to people not showing diplomacy towards you, unless you yourself can show yourself to be capable of diplomacy, you lose the rational ability to complain, right? So that alone gives you a reason to be diplomatic. But there's more to it than that, all right? One is, like I said in the original video, the assumption here in the suggestion I made is that you want to maintain the relationship, right? That's the, and I said, if you get away from that person if you want, fine. But one, you need to have a degree of diplomacy to maintain any relationship both people do. And the very reason I said you may want to consider whether you want this person around anymore. And I have gotten rid of people from too many blasé statements of this sort. And the moderators are constantly telling me I give people still too many chances, and they're right. So, but that's for Feedback Friday. If you want benefit of doubt, you have to show it. And that's a big part of diplomacy. Like I said at the beginning of this video, even though this comment hit me like a punch in the gut and a punch in the face, and then another punch in the gut, and then another punch in the face, it's still, again, if one person's saying it, and the fact that this video got dislike bombed and not enough people left comments explaining why for me to understand what made people so angry, I have to guess, rage over a YouTube video. See, this is something where I come at it from the position of it's just an opinion. But for so many people, opinions read as threats. So it's worth talking about, right? Benefit of doubt. I want it, so I'm going to extend it. I don't show hypocritical behavior, despite what the comment said. I do not reek, I showered today, okay? And this is when the commenter's probably going to go, oh, I wasn't talking about you. Yeah, but you weren't clear. It was my video. You're saying I expect you to play diplomat. The hypocrisy of it reeks. Okay, I'm showing you how I think I'm being pretty consistent and not hypocritical here because I want benefit of the doubt. Therefore, I'm going to show it. Therefore, instead of coming at them, say, you're this, you're that, you're the hypocrite, I'm going to say, look, here's the issue. Here's the breakdown here. Can you see that? As opposed to, you made me so angry. And that's not what the commenter said. Okay, I'm just trying to have a little fun with this. Diplomacy, therefore, is a show of strength, right? It's showing you can absorb things that are, and the Zionist baby killer thing drove me off of Blue Sky. I got so sick of being called that when nobody asked me whether I'm even a Zionist or not. You know, a major step was skipped, right? Because I said the Gaza Health Ministry is run by Hamas, I must be a Zionist who loves dead babies. Yeah, thank you, Scout. Scout agreed. So that one really hit hard because every Jewish person, I mean, we just lit a yahrzeit candle for my late father-in-law yesterday. And all of those traditions are really, they have a whole new meaning in the face of, it is literally a world where if you are a Jewish person remotely on the left, you constantly have to prove you're one of the good ones or else face the wrath of Blue Sky. Now they've left Twitter and they like, it was based on something I said on Twitter and they followed me to fucking Blue Sky to insist I love dead babies. Narrator, she doesn't love dead babies, right? So, but me even saying this, me saying this is hard, it's a bit of a, hey, I can take it, right? If I wasn't prepared to eat shit for something, I'm not going to say it on YouTube. Now, eating shit, like people getting offended, is not the same as people raging. And again, that was, whoa, I don't think anything I did warranted rage. But that's the other thing. I am responsible for what I say. I'm not responsible for what anyone else says. And if you are allowing yourself to be infected by other people's poor behavior, it makes it harder for third parties to see, who's at fault there, right? If someone, calls me a Zionist baby murderer and I respond in kind, well, then we're both assholes. If somebody calls me a Zionist baby murderer and I'm like, why don't you check out whether I'm even a Zionist? No, believing in the God-given homeland for the Jews, which you can probably tell by the mockery in my voice, that is not a belief system I subscribe. That's not, we have to say it at Passover, but I am very conflicted about the idea that land belongs to anyone because God. Like, that just, I struggle greatly with that concept because I think it leads to tribalism and whatnot. Now, does that mean that people don't deserve a safe place to live? No, of course, everybody deserves a safe place to live. And there are far too many people in the world, including Ukraine, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, parts of Chicago, right? Parts of Winnipeg, parts of Vancouver, parts of Toronto that aren't safe. Some people's own homes aren't safe. But, this is me appealing to people's compassion. It's me seeking understanding and clarity instead of retaliating. I feel falsely accused. I feel like it's unfair. So I'm going to retaliate and be unfair and falsely accused. So that makes it even. No, that's not how I want to show up. Right? That just makes me look bad. And in a lot of ways, it accidentally proves the other person's false point. Right? And I don't want to do that. Right? The point of diplomacy is providing the kindest truth you can manage while still being authentic. You don't have to be diplomatic in easy conversations, right? I spent 3 days this week composing an email to someone who had reacted badly on the Discord. And I truly think this person is a good person, but it was so over the line and everybody was frustrated and the mods are getting exhausted by stuff and I am getting exhausted. And it's like, can everybody just please stop and think for a second before, and I saw Wicked on the weekend, so it's like flying off the handle, it's about being authentic, being honest, but also being factual and being fair. And it's about not getting walked on, right? Because I've dealt with enough bullies to know that if they make you snap, which is what I used to do. I have a very, very strong fight response. So if somebody comes at me, I'm like, and I actually Kratos'd someone. There's been this whole thing about people doing, well, if you want me to leave the server, and I never said I wanted the person to leave the server. If I wanted someone to leave the server, I would kick them off the server. It's just so that's me saying they want to leave, but they want to make it my fault. And they usually do leave. It's just like they're halfway out the door the minute they say that. But this one person who I think isn't that said, do you think it's a good idea if I leave the server so I stop getting in trouble? And I just wrote no. And that was the question they asked. Unfortunately, this person is autistic, so I think it's more okay than an allistic person. But I answered the question they asked, but I failed to add the veneer of nice that would make the medicine go down more. And like I said, this is more forgivable with autistic people than allistic people, which is why, in many ways, even with some of the communication challenges, I feel more comfortable around autistic people. Is this a bias of mine? Yes, I am aware. It doesn't mean I won't deal with allistic people. It just means, I'm more comfortable even with the meltdowns, even with the overwhelm, even with the confusion sometimes and the struggle to try to explain things. I much more prefer people saying what they mean. And that doesn't mean no allistic people say what they mean, right? Being diplomatic here. It's just, I find it more exhausting to parse the nice game among allistic people, right? I start to feel walked on by that, and then I have to be careful not to respond to that without context. I have my own version of overwhelm that happens when you have trauma triggers. And the problem is trauma triggers are bodily, right? They happen sometimes before you realize what's going on. And so sometimes you'll do things like, wait, why do I do that? And then you realize you're shaking, right? The core question, why be diplomatic? I'll flip it around. Why would anyone listen to someone who either can't be diplomatic, refuses to be, or decides you're not worth being diplomatic to, which was the entire purpose of the original Safe Target Syndrome video. People get too comfortable with someone and they forget that this is a human being with feelings and dignity too. And sometimes people do have to be checked about that. Being diplomatic is really rooted in a complex series of perception of choices. It's being persuasive. It's, all right, I can choose to burn the bridge now and just go, you fucking hypocrite. Knowing full well the person might get offended and never speak to me again, right? I also realize that people tend to make generalizations not recognizing how hurtful those generalizations are. And this is ironically in part because of the conversations I have with people who come from different backgrounds. And, they talk about how much they are carrying the emotional weight of other people and all the little digs that people don't realize are digs. If it's autistic people, it's the constant, why can't you be normal? The idea that autistic people always accommodate allistic people, which is just not fucking fair, right? I would rather help contribute to a world where if someone is autistic, they ask me, what does this mean? So I can tell them. And they can say a lot of the time they'll ask me, it's like, yeah, that's expecting you to translate. Right. And that's how I came to the realization that things like moving on, that's not something you can directly, go after. That is the result of processing, of understanding, of recentering. You move on when you recenter. Kind of like you get the next level when you beat the boss. You don't just try to get to the next level, right? Unless it's Dark Souls, you can run past the bosses. But you know what I mean? The metaphor kind of stands, even though it's ish. The goal of being diplomatic is that you get something of what you want. And you keep getting it in the long term. As opposed to 100% digging in and possibly ending the relationship. I don't say ruin the relationship, because sometimes you have to realize the relationship is ruined and there's nothing to salvage. And I've had a lot of those in the last little bit. And was I diplomatic there? No, because I had no, there was nothing to say. There was no diplomacy to be had. War happens when diplomacy fails. When people don't want to fight, they don't fight. When people want to fight, they will fight, right? The intent is not to manipulate someone into doing something they don't want to do. The intent is not to eat shit. The intent is not to get walked on. The intent of diplomacy is really owning your choices and then letting the other person be aware of their choices. So everyone gets a choice. No one feels coerced. That's why it's persuasion instead of coercion, which is the big issue I have with a lot of the political discourse, right? It's trying to coerce people. It's trying to bludgeon people, not into changing their mind, but either pretending to change their mind or just shutting up and checking out. The only way conversations can be productive is if there is diplomacy. Because if you're raging and that frightens the other person, well, that's not there. You can't have the conversation then. Rage and fear don't make for good decisions. That's one of the things you have to recognize when you're feeling that angry or you're feeling that frightened. You're not going to make good choices. Adrenaline's coursing through your body. I mean, my cheeks flushed even talking about that, because I was actually connecting to what a punch in the face, punch in the gut, then a punch in the face again. It felt like, right? Now, this commenter probably wasn't thinking about that being my experience. And so pointing that out was, intended to say, this is why I had this bad reaction, like I said. And the whole point of at length talking about what a bad reaction I had was to illustrate, I'm not saying diplomacy is a good skill to learn because it's easy. Quite the opposite. You need a lot of maturity and a lot of strength to go, yeah, this is what happened, but I'm going to do the brave thing and the mature thing and own my reaction and then go, okay, we're going to talk about this peaceably, right? Without name calling, with benefit of the doubt, because, I think this commenter was speaking from a place of real pain, and that's valid. I can set a boundary of I'm not willing to be the target of anger over a YouTube video where allegedly you think I have good intentions. If you think somebody has good intentions, then please examine where the rage is coming from, because I don't tend to rage or have to stop myself from raging when I think someone means well. Rage is a very intense emotion. And again, if that was hyperbolic rhetoric, this is where diplomacy comes in. Because when you start from rage, and this is something I had to learn to control my own trauma responses, right? Because again, inner Kratos, raw, right? When you start with rage, that's the primary thing that someone is going to be responding to. That you are just trying to hold it together. People don't tend to want to talk to people in that state. They're unpredictable. They tend to say things that are hurtful. And that's what happened. And I recognize that a lot of people write YouTube comments about a video, but they're not talking about the video. They're talking about something else, but they're not clear. And this is why I'm trying to do a better form of YouTube. But the only way to do that, the only way to have these better conversations is through a level of diplomacy. And, you know, I can get into, I recognize you have good intentions is a bit of a diss because, well, I recognize you have good intentions. The implication is your execution sucked and here's why, right? It's, you know, and that's not necessarily the way somebody means it. It's just the way it tends to land a lot of the time. Because again, if someone has good intentions, why the rage? And that's the big thing about being diplomatic. People are gonna wanna give you more of their time. They're going to listen to you more. People get very unnerved by people. And again, I say this as somebody who deals with trauma triggers and I have very strong emotions that I don't understand sometimes. And I recognize that is difficult for the people around me. And I am constantly examining, was I being tough with someone from a tactical perspective, or did I just lose my shit? And there are some times, like the people in the Discord can vouch for the fact that sometimes I do lose my shit and I own it. And I say, I lost my shit. I'm sorry. With this comment, I actually said on the Discord at the time, I just read a comment that actually triggered me and I had to walk away. And that's the first part of diplomacy, is that's recognizing your weaknesses and recognizing your strengths and playing your moves accordingly, right? You don't try to brute force a door with a blunt weapon as a mage in D&D. It's not going to work as well. If you're a fighter, yeah, smash through it, right? But as a mage, no, cast knock. It's going to be a lot more effective, right? You know what I mean? If the door is not, there's an exception to everything, right? And that's the other thing about diplomacy. Realizing those exceptions, right? The idea that most people with present day mores wouldn't expect members of any minority group to exclude themselves from gross blanket statements, that is so not true that Chris Rock did a stand-up about that. It was about rap music and the misogynistic lyrics in rap music and how women can enjoy the beat and they're dancing to it. And, you know, he was like, how can you listen to that? He ain't talking about me. Right? Assume everyone is filtering out some of these statements somehow. Absolutely no one is immune to them. I've had quite a few of late. And yeah, it wears me out. I said in the Discord, I'm thinking about taking a YouTube break over the holidays just because I am worn out. I am worn out by rage that I don't feel like I deserve. That's not forever, but it is very tiring to constantly be the safe target for people's anger that has nothing to do with me. And one thing about diplomacy is it's finding the commonalities between people. I understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of these things. I conduct myself in a way that gets the best results and reduces the insensitive comments on other people. But let's be fair here, right? Everybody says things that are insensitive sometimes. Everybody does. Even the most conscientious person in the world, because we're missing something. I don't expect perfection from anyone. And if I am feeling overloaded, I am responsible for setting boundaries and getting space. Nobody else does that work for me. Why do I do that? Because I don't want to be the person raging at a YouTuber for experiences that YouTuber wasn't a direct part of. That when I start feeling those out of control emotions, I know I have to get myself centered before I open my mouth. And that means, I can't have conversations with people who disagree with me, and I can be authentic and I can say like not cool without it being aggressive, right? Without shitting on people, giving people benefit of the doubt, saying, you have good intentions is not the same thing as I believe you are a good person. And that I believe you are a good person is a huge part of communication that I really think more people need to hear. But so many people are afraid to say it because they believe that the world doesn't think they're a good person. And that's the big part of diplomacy that makes it so powerful. If you lead with kindness when other people don't, when you keep it together while other people are losing their shit, even if it bothers you, you can go, I'm bothered, but look, I'm holding it together. The person has choices. The people have choices. They can join you in better. They can reciprocate the kindness, or they can continue to be an asshole. And if they continue to be an asshole, they've showed you who they are. And that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. And that's when you realize diplomacy is not possible, because the beautiful thing about diplomacy is it requires two sides. It requires a certain amount of agreement to build towards consensus. And that's the kind of agreement I want. I want agreements to build towards consensus, because those are the people that you can have productive relations with. That's the purpose of being diplomatic. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. See, this video was 42 minutes long. Feedback Friday would have gotten blown out. Thanks for watching and be well.